Welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that I think is super important, and that's our emotions.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah. We'll be using excerpts from Master Your Emotions
Okay.
to kind of figure out why we feel the way we do, how those feelings mess with our lives, and then, most importantly, how to make them work for us instead of against us.
I love that. Yeah, the book is fascinating because it goes beyond surface level advice and really digs into the root of our emotional experiences. It's not just about coping, it's about true mastery. And so I'm excited to dive into this with you.
Yes, yes, getting to that root, that's what we're all about.
Right.
And so, the book starts off with this idea that our brain's survival mechanisms are kind of stuck in the past, still reacting like we're dodging saber-toothed tigers. Do you think that's really true?
I think that's a really compelling argument. Our brains evolved to prioritize threats in a world where danger was often physical and immediate.
Right.
So we developed this negativity bias to keep us safe.
Right.
But today, most of our perceived threats, like a bad performance review or a social media snub,
Yeah.
those aren't actually life or death situations,
Right.
even though our brains might treat them that way.
I can see that, like how one nasty comment online can completely overshadow 100 positive ones.
Right.
The book even gives that example,
Absolutely.
the author focusing on a single one-star review,
Yeah.
even though they have tons of five-star reviews.
Really?
I guess it's easier to focus on the negative.
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Hmm.
But then the book also goes into the fact that we have this thing called the ego, which I think that also plays into it a lot.
Okay, yeah.
Um, And so it talks about the ego in depth, and we can think about the ego as this constructed sense of self that we create,
Okay.
and it craves validation,
Uh-huh.
and it uses things like possessions, relationships, even our problems to
Wow.
strengthen its own identity.
So it's like those parents who live vicariously through their kids at soccer games.
Huh.
It's their ego trying to feel important.
That's a great example, yeah.
Yeah.
And even like the book even talks about how attaching to certain beliefs, especially strong beliefs like some religious beliefs, that can become a way for the ego to assert itself.
Oh, wow.
And it highlights how that can have some pretty extreme consequences, both for the individual and for society.
Yeah, it's a heavy thought.
It is. It is.
So we've got this ancient survival mechanism
Right.
and an ego that's constantly trying to protect itself, but where do our emotions actually fit into all of this?
That's where I think the dopamine trap comes in.
Okay.
So dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a big role in the brain's reward system.
Okay.
In the past, it was mostly linked to survival, like feeling
Yeah.
good when we found food. But now we have all these artificial triggers that flood our brains with dopamine,
Mm.
even when there's no real benefit.
Like getting a ton of notifications on social media,
Exactly.
even if they're just spam.
Exactly. Or things
Mhm.
like pornography or endless scrolling on TikTok, things like that.
Yeah.
And the book shares a shocking story about the Korean gamer who tragically died after playing for 58 hours straight,
Oh, wow.
highlighting just how powerful these dopamine-driven behaviors can become. And it makes me think about this. What are some things that you think that people are addicted to that they might not even realize are harmful?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm addicted to my phone,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of people are. I think that's a really, really common one. But that ties into the whole idea of the hedonic treadmill, right? Which the book talks about.
Yes, the hedonic treadmill, which is fascinating.
Yes.
And it explains it really well. And it's this idea that no matter what happens to us, good or bad,
Mm.
we eventually adapt and return to a baseline level of happiness.
Wait, so even if I won the lottery, I wouldn't be happy in the long run?
There was a study
Wow.
that compared lottery winners to people who had become paraplegic.
Oh, wow.
After a year, both groups reported roughly the same level of happiness
Wow.
as they had before these major life events.
So it seems happiness doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how we choose to perceive it and respond to it.
Exactly. And that is incredibly empowering
Yeah.
because it means we have way more control over our own happiness than we often realize.
So it's more about our mindset than our circumstances.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, and this book has a ton of tools and techniques that can help us cultivate that inner happiness.
Okay.
But I think first it's helpful to understand how our emotions actually form.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah.
How do these feelings even come about?
Yeah, so the book breaks it down into 3 stages, which I think is really helpful: interpretation, identification, and repetition. So first we interpret an event, assigning meaning to it.
Okay.
So, like, let's say you get passed over for a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you interpret that as a personal failure or as an opportunity to pursue a new path?
Yeah.
So it's not the event itself,
Right.
but the meaning we give it.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Exactly. Then comes identification, where we either identify or disidentify with the thoughts and feelings associated with our interpretation.
Okay.
And then the more we ruminate and repeat those thoughts and feelings, the
Uh,
stronger they become.
so if I keep replaying that promotion scenario in my head, focusing on how unfair it was and how much I deserved it,
Yep.
those feelings of resentment and disappointment, they just get magnified.
Exactly. The more you dwell on it, the more real it becomes for you.
Wow.
So the good news is you can consciously choose to disidentify with these thoughts and feelings, weakening them until they eventually lose their power over you.
Okay.
And the book even offers a 5-step process for letting go, which I think we should definitely dive into later.
Okay. Yeah.
But first, I think it's important to understand how these emotional states act as filters,
Yeah.
shaping our entire perception of reality.
Okay, filters. Dot. Explain that one for me.
Okay, so think of it like wearing different colored glasses.
Yeah.
When you're wearing rose-colored glasses, everything seems bright and cheerful.
Yeah.
But if you switch to like gray-tinted glasses,
Yeah.
the world appears dull and gloomy, even though nothing has actually changed except your perspective.
Right.
Our emotions act in a similar way,
Yeah.
coloring our perceptions and influencing our actions.
So if I'm feeling happy and confident, I'm more likely to see opportunities, feel energized, and go after what I want. But if I'm feeling down or anxious, even simple tasks feel like climbing a mountain.
You got it.
Okay.
And the book even shares a personal example from the author's own experience. When they were excited and passionate about their online business, they had more energy, were more open to new ideas, and had more resilience when facing challenges.
Mm.
But when they started to feel discouraged by a lack of results, they found themselves doubting their abilities, procrastinating, and struggling to stay motivated.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's like
Yeah.
those days where everything feels off, and even getting out of bed feels like a monumental effort. So managing our emotional state is really crucial.
Absolutely. And the book isn't about denying or suppressing our emotions.
Right.
It's about learning to recognize them, understand their origins, and
Yeah.
choose our responses consciously.
Yeah. So that brings us to the next section of the book, mastering our emotions.
Yes.
That's a pretty big promise. So how do we even begin to master our emotions?
Well, the book has a lot of suggestions,
Hmm.
but one of the first steps it recommends is reframing those negative interpretations and questioning the assumptions we hold about our problems, the past and the future. Basically, it's about choosing to see things differently.
So instead of always assuming the worst, try to see the situation from a more empowering perspective.
Exactly. Another key point is learning to let go of emotions that aren't serving us.
Okay.
And it even uses a great analogy. It says our emotions are like temporary clothing, not our true selves.
Oh, I love that analogy. It really puts things in perspective.
Right.
But how do we actually let go of these feelings?
Well, there's a 5-step process outlined in the book.
Mm.
Observe, label, accept, release, and repeat. It involves becoming aware of the emotion, acknowledging it without judging yourself,
Mm.
allowing yourself to fully feel it, and then consciously choosing to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think is the most difficult part of that process for you?
For me,
Yeah.
acceptance, I think, is a big one. It's hard to just like let yourself feel the negative emotions without
Yeah,
trying to push them away.
totally. That's a common struggle.
Yeah.
But it's so important to allow yourself to experience the full spectrum of emotions. And then the book also emphasizes the power of conditioning your mind to experience more positive emotions. And it's all about realizing that our thoughts shape our reality
Right.
and even our self-esteem.
So if we can change our thoughts, we can change our feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book provides practical exercises for cultivating positive emotions like gratitude and excitement.
Yeah.
And it also encourages us to align our actions with our desired feelings.
Mm.
So what's one area in your life where you'd like to feel differently, and how do you think you could change your actions to achieve that?
Oh, that's a good question. That's something I'll definitely have to think about. But this idea of using our emotions as a guide for personal growth, I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a powerful concept. And the book uses these inspiring examples like Alice Summer, a woman who found joy even while imprisoned in a concentration camp,
Yeah.
and Nick Vujicic, who built a fulfilling life despite being born without limbs.
Mhm.
They show us that even in the toughest situations, we have the power to choose our perspective and find meaning.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about that idea?
Well, it challenges the way we usually think about negative emotions. It's like instead of seeing them as weaknesses,
Yeah.
we can reframe them as opportunities for learning and growth.
You got it. And the book introduces two models that can help with this. The above-below-the-line model and the fears versus love model. So the
Mhm.
above-below-the-line model helps you recognize when you're operating from a place of fear and defensiveness versus a place of openness and curiosity.
So below the line is reactive and closed off, while above the line is more open to new information and growth.
Exactly.
But how do you actually know when you're in each state?
Well, the book provides specific behaviors that are characteristic of each state, which can help you become more self-aware.
Okay.
For example, if you find yourself blaming others or making excuses, that's a pretty clear sign you're below the line. And the book suggests, in those moments, asking yourself, am I open to learning here?
Hmm.
Am I taking responsibility for my part in this situation?
Those are great questions to ask yourself. And what about the fear versus love model?
That model is all about understanding the motivations behind our actions. Are we acting from a place of fear, trying to protect ourselves or get something we lack? Or are we acting from a place of love, wanting to contribute, connect, and create something meaningful?
That's an interesting distinction. I can see how becoming aware of those motivations could really change how we approach situations.
Exactly. And to help with that, the book encourages keeping a journal to track your emotional patterns, interpretations, and potential areas for reframing. It's all about becoming more conscious of your inner world.
That's great, but I'd also like to look at some specific emotions in more depth.
Yeah.
Does the book go into any particular challenges that people might face?
It absolutely does. It dives deep into a whole bunch of negative emotions,
Okay.
offering insights and strategies for each. It covers things like feeling not good enough, being defensive, feeling stressed and worried, caring too much about what others think, resentment, jealousy, and even depression and fear.
That's quite the list. Which one do you think we should tackle first? I'm guessing a lot of people might resonate with the feeling of not being good enough. Maybe we could start there.
That's a great place to start. And the book says this feeling often stems from our negativity bias,
Hmm.
which makes us focus on our flaws instead of our strengths.
Right.
It also ties into the ego's need for validation.
So it's like constantly looking for evidence to confirm our belief that we're not worthy.
Right. And the book stresses the importance of challenging this negative self-talk.
Okay.
It encourages us to consciously focus on our positive qualities and achievements.
So when someone gives us a compliment,
Yes,
instead of brushing it off, just say thank you and really take it in.
exactly. It's about retraining your brain to see the good in yourself
Mm.
and believe you are worthy of appreciation.
I love that. But what are some practical exercises the book suggests to actually overcome this feeling?
Yeah, so it recommends keeping a win log where you track your accomplishments, even the small ones,
Okay.
or creating a self-esteem jar where you write down positive things about yourself and put them in a jar so you can visually see all the good you bring to the table.
That's a great visual. I can see how that could be a powerful reminder.
Totally. And there's also this suggestion to create a positive journal where you record all the compliments you receive. Basically, it's about actively seeking out and noticing the evidence that contradicts your negative beliefs.
It's like consciously shifting your focus from what you lack to what you already have.
Exactly. And the book also emphasizes learning to accept compliments gracefully
Yeah.
instead of dismissing them or downplaying them.
Makes sense. Okay, we've covered feeling not good enough, but I'm also curious about what it has to say about defensiveness.
Yeah.
You know, that knee-jerk reaction we all have when we feel attacked or criticized.
Right. That's another common struggle. And the book offers some real insights into why we get defensive. It explains that it comes from the desire to protect our ego, that constructed sense of self we've built over time.
So if someone criticizes us, even if it's constructive, we take it as a personal attack.
Right. It's like they're threatening our carefully constructed identity. And actually, the book breaks it down into three main reasons why we might get triggered.
Okay.
So the first one is maybe there is some truth to it, and we're just not ready to face it yet.
Okay.
Or we already believe that there's truth to it, even if it's not accurate,
Right.
because it plays into our pre-existing negative beliefs about ourselves.
So even if someone is wrong about me, if they accuse me of being lazy and I already kind of believe I'm not a hard worker, I might get defensive, even though it's not true.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
And then the third reason is that maybe they are challenging one of our core beliefs, like a political or religious belief. And so the more attached we are to that belief,
Right.
the more threatened we're going to feel if it's challenged.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how do we learn to be less defensive?
Yeah, the book has some practical strategies for that too.
Okay.
The first step is becoming aware of your triggers, those beliefs or values that you feel the need to protect.
Right.
And then you can start to question those beliefs and see if they're actually serving you.
So before reacting defensively, pause and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What am I trying to protect?
Exactly. And the book even suggests some powerful questions to ask yourself when you feel defensive.
Hmm.
What am I trying to protect here? Can I let go of this belief? What would I be without this belief?
Those are some deep questions.
They are.
Yeah. I can see how taking a step back and really examining those knee-jerk reactions could be a game changer.
It's all about taking control of your emotional responses and choosing how you want to show up in the world.
This has been a really insightful conversation so far.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground.
We have. And this is just the beginning. We still have more emotions to explore and practical strategies to unpack from Master Your Emotions.
Exactly. So be sure to join us for part 2 of this deep dive, or we'll continue our exploration.
I'm excited.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Master Your Emotions.
I'm ready for more. Me too.
Yeah. Last time we explored some pretty heavy stuff, like the ego's need for validation and how our brains are basically stuck in survival mode. But there's a whole host of other emotions this book unpacks. What's next on our emotional roller coaster ride?
Well, we briefly touched on defensiveness,
Right.
but there are a lot more common emotions this book dives into.
All right.
And one that stood out to me was stress and worry. I mean, those are two feelings
Oh, yeah.
pretty much everyone can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Stress and worry are practically universal experiences in today's world. What's the book's take on these two emotional heavyweights?
Well, the book makes this really interesting point about taking responsibility for our own stress.
Okay.
It argues that stress doesn't actually exist outside of ourselves.
Okay.
It's not the situation itself,
Right.
but our reaction to it that creates stress.
So if my boss dumps a huge project on my desk at 5 p.m. on a Friday,
Yep.
it's not the project itself that's stressful, but my thoughts about it that create the feeling of stress? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's actually quite empowering because it means we have more control over our stress levels than we might realize.
Okay.
And the book suggests kind of two main approaches. Either avoid situations we know trigger our stress response, or get better at dealing with those situations when they inevitably arise.
So it's about recognizing our personal stress triggers and either steering clear of them or developing coping mechanisms to handle them more effectively.
Precisely. And it also highlights the importance of reframing our perception of stress. So instead of seeing it as purely negative,
Right.
what if we viewed it as a signal that something needs to change?
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's a sign we need to set better boundaries, communicate our needs more clearly, or reevaluate our priorities.
That's such a helpful way to look at it. So instead of freaking out when I'm stuck in traffic, which happens way too often, I could use that time to listen to a podcast or practice some mindfulness exercises, turning a frustrating situation into an opportunity for growth.
That's a perfect example. It's about finding those little pockets of opportunity in everyday life, even in seemingly negative situations.
Yeah. But what about worry?
Yeah.
How does the book differentiate that from stress?
So the book defines worry as being concerned about events in the past or future,
Okay.
while stress is more of a response to what's happening right now in the present moment.
So stressing about that big presentation I have to give at work
Mhm.
is different from worrying about what people might think of me during the presentation or whether I'll forget my lines.
Exactly. And the book points out that a lot of our worries are actually wasted energy
Right.
because they're either focused on things we can't control,
Right.
like the past, or things that might not even happen, like those hypothetical what-if scenarios we create in our minds.
I am definitely guilty of that.
Yeah.
Spending hours worrying about things that never even come to pass. So
Mm.
how do we break free from that worry trap?
The book provides this really helpful exercise. It suggests sorting our worries into 3 categories: things we have complete control over, things we have some influence over, and things we have absolutely no control over whatsoever.
So if I'm worried about my finances,
Yep.
I might have control over how much I spend each month,
Mm-hmm.
some influence over how much I earn, but no control over the stock market or inflation rates.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
And once you've categorized your worries, the key is to focus your energy on the things you can actually control. Take action where you can, create a plan, and let go of the need to control the things that are outside your sphere of influence. Easier said than done, right?
Definitely a practice in progress. But I love how this book keeps coming back to the theme of personal responsibility and empowerment. It's not about denying our emotions,
Right.
but recognizing where we have agency and where we need to surrender.
It's a refreshing perspective. And this ties in nicely with the next emotion the book dives into, caring what other people think.
Oh, yeah.
It's something I think a lot of people struggle with, especially in the age of social media.
Oh,
We're,
yeah.
we're bombarded with images of perfect lives, and everyone seems to have it all figured out. Have you
Yeah.
ever fallen into that trap?
Oh, totally. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others and worrying about whether we measure up. What's the book's antidote to this social pressure?
Well, it starts with a powerful reminder. You are the most important person in the world.
Ooh.
And that doesn't mean you're being selfish or narcissistic.
Right.
It simply means recognizing that you are the one who has to live with yourself 24/7.
So it's about prioritizing your own well-being and happiness, not letting the opinions of others dictate how you live your life.
Exactly. And it goes on to say that most people are actually far less concerned with us than we might think.
Okay.
They're busy living their own lives, dealing with their own insecurities and worries.
Right.
They probably don't have the time or energy to be constantly judging us.
So all that time I spent agonizing over what others might think of me was probably completely unnecessary.
Very likely. And the book emphasizes that trying to please everyone is a surefire recipe for misery. No matter what you do, there will always be someone who disapproves. It's just not possible to please everyone all the time.
So it's about embracing your authentic self and letting go of that need for constant approval.
Precisely. The book encourages us to express our unique personalities and live in alignment with our values,
Yeah,
regardless of whether it gets everyone's stamp of approval.
I love that. It's about defining your own worth and living on your own terms. But the book also talks about the most important person concept, and it acknowledges that not everyone will love us. Are there any other key takeaways when it comes to this whole caring what people think dilemma?
Yeah, there are. And I think one of the most important ones is this idea of letting go of our attachment to a fixed self-image. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that the way we perceive ourselves might not be entirely accurate. And it's often based on fears and insecurities that we've accumulated over time.
So instead of clinging to a certain idea of who we are, we need to be open to challenging those beliefs and allowing ourselves to evolve and change.
Exactly. It's
Right.
about becoming more self-aware, recognizing those negative thought patterns that keep us stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and self-consciousness.
This is great stuff. But do you think the book offers any specific exercises to help people actually overcome this tendency to care too much about what others think?
Yeah.
It seems like it would be really tough to just flip a switch and stop caring altogether.
Well, it definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
But the book suggests this really interesting exercise where you choose someone you know
Okay.
and ask yourself how often you think about them in your daily life.
Oh, yeah.
Then you put yourself in their shoes and ask how often they're likely thinking about you.
That's such a clever perspective shift. It would definitely help us see how self-centered our thinking can be. We tend to assume we're at the center of everyone's universe when, in reality, most people are preoccupied with their own lives and concerns.
Precisely. And the book also suggests writing down all the things you're afraid of being judged for,
Okay.
and then exploring why you care so much about those judgments.
Mm-hmm.
What's the underlying fear or insecurity that's driving that worry? Once you bring those fears to the surface, you can start to challenge them and develop more empowering beliefs.
I love that. It's like shining a light on those shadowy fears and realizing they're not as powerful as we thought they were.
Exactly. And that's a key step in reclaiming your power and living more authentically, free from the constraints of what others might think.
So we've talked about feeling not good enough, defensiveness, stress, worry, and the trap of caring too much about what others think. What other emotional landmine do you think we should explore?
Hmm. Well, resentment.
Ooh, yes.
Resentment is a powerful emotion and one that can be incredibly damaging if we let it fester. And I love the analogy the book uses, comparing resentment to drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies.
Ouch. That's a pretty potent image. So how does resentment take root in our lives?
Well, it often stems from the feeling that someone has wronged us
Okay.
or treated us unfairly. We might feel betrayed, hurt, or angry.
Mm-hmm.
And it can often arise from unmet expectations
Right.
or a lack of clear communication in our relationships.
So if I'm resentful towards a friend because they didn't invite me to their party, It might be because I had an unspoken expectation that I would be invited,
Mhm.
or because I didn't clearly communicate my desire to be included.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes that resentment, like all emotions, intensifies based on how we interpret, identify with, and repeat the story of the event.
So if I keep replaying that party snub in my head and focusing on how unfair it was and how hurt I feel,
Yeah.
those feelings of resentment are just going to grow stronger.
Exactly. It's like watering a weed in your mental garden. The more attention you give it, the bigger and stronger it grows. And the book highlights the real danger of letting resentment fester. It can poison our relationships, drain our energy, and prevent us from moving forward in our lives. It can really make us bitter and cynical.
So how do we break free from that cycle of resentment? Does the book offer any steps to help us let go of that bitterness?
It does. And the first step is to challenge your interpretation of the event.
Yeah.
Could you have overreacted? Is it possible you misunderstood the situation? Or that there were factors you weren't aware of? It's about taking a step back and trying to see the situation from a more objective perspective
Okay.
without those emotional filters clouding your judgment.
So in that party example, maybe my friend had a limited guest list. Or
Right.
maybe they genuinely thought I wouldn't enjoy that type of party.
Yeah,
It's about considering other perspectives and not assuming the worst intentions.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the book also encourages us to confront the situation directly if possible. So if your resentment is directed towards another person, try having an honest conversation with them and share how you feel.
Okay.
Express your hurt without blaming or attacking.
So instead of stewing in silence and letting that resentment simmer, we should try to communicate openly and work towards a resolution.
Yes, communication is key. And even if you can't have a direct conversation, maybe the person is no longer in your life.
Right.
The book suggests writing them a letter to express your feelings.
Yeah.
Even if you never send it, the act of writing it out can be cathartic and help you release some of that pent-up resentment.
That's a great suggestion. But what if the person doesn't acknowledge their wrongdoing or isn't willing to apologize? How do you move forward when you feel like the other person isn't taking responsibility?
Yeah, that can be really challenging. But the book emphasizes the importance of forgiveness. It reminds us that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison ourselves and hoping it will harm the other person.
Right.
We're the ones who end up suffering the most.
It's about recognizing that forgiveness is ultimately an act of self-love, right? It's about freeing ourselves from that negativity and choosing peace instead.
Beautifully said. And the book suggests this beautiful way to think about forgiveness. It's about reconnecting with the present moment, the only thing that's truly real,
Yeah,
and letting go of the past, which no longer exists.
I love that. Okay, so we've challenged our interpretation, confronted the situation, and worked towards forgiveness. What's the final step in letting go of resentment?
The book emphasizes the importance of forgetting. Now, it doesn't mean we have to erase the memory of the event,
Right,
but it means choosing not to dwell on it,
right.
to replay it over and over in our minds like a broken record. It's about consciously shifting your focus to something more positive and productive.
So it's about reclaiming your mental space and choosing not to let that past hurt define your present experience.
Exactly. And it's a practice. It's not a one-time event. Those resentful thoughts might still pop up from time to time, but the more you practice letting them go, the weaker their hold on you will become. It's like training a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets.
This has been so helpful. We've covered so much ground on resentment. But there's another emotion the book tackles that I think we should at least touch on. Jealousy.
Oh, yeah.
It can be such a powerful and often destructive emotion. What insights does the book offer on understanding and managing those pangs of jealousy?
It's interesting because the book acknowledges that jealousy can actually be a helpful emotion in some cases.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it can act as a signal that we're not on the right path
Okay.
or that we're longing for something we're not currently pursuing.
So if I'm jealous of a friend who's traveling the world, it might be a sign that I'm yearning for more adventure in my own life. Maybe it's a nudge to finally book that trip I've been dreaming of.
Exactly. It can be a wake-up call to examine your priorities and make changes that align with your true desires. The book even shares examples of how jealousy led the author to pursue their passion for writing and helped another person realize they were in the wrong career.
That's so empowering. So it's not about suppressing those feelings of jealousy, but about exploring what they might be trying to tell us about our own unmet needs and desires.
Yes, it's about using jealousy as a catalyst for self-discovery and growth. But the book also points out that jealousy can sometimes be a symptom of a scarcity mindset.
Right.
The belief that there's not enough to go around.
So instead of celebrating other people's successes, we might see them as a threat to our own happiness or achievements. Like
Yeah.
if someone else wins, it means we automatically lose.
Precisely. And the book encourages us to cultivate an abundance mindset. Instead, the belief that there's plenty of success, happiness, and love to go around for everyone.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that one person's win doesn't diminish our own potential for success.
I love that. It's about seeing the world as a place of infinite possibilities, not a zero-sum game where someone else's gain is automatically our loss. But how do you actually shift from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset?
It takes conscious effort and practice. The book suggests practicing gratitude, focusing on your own unique strengths and blessings, and celebrating other people's successes instead of feeling threatened by them. It's also about recognizing that comparing ourselves to others is a recipe for unhappiness.
Right.
Focus on your own unique journey and celebrate your own progress, no matter how small.
So it's about defining your own definition of success and fulfillment, rather than measuring yourself against some external standard that might not even be relevant to your own values and goals.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message that can help us navigate all sorts of challenging emotions, not just jealousy.
This has been such a rich and insightful conversation so far. We've covered so much ground, from understanding how emotions form to exploring specific challenges like feeling not good enough, defensiveness, stress, worry, caring what people think, resentment, and even jealousy.
We have. And there's still more to uncover in this
Hmm.
fascinating book.
Oh, there is.
Yeah,
Oh,
I know.
no.
I know. We've got a lot to talk about. There are a few more emotions to explore and a whole toolkit of practical strategies for transforming our relationship with them.
Well, I think we need to take a break
Yeah?
and let all of this information sink in.
Totally.
We'll be back with more from Master Your Emotions in part 3 of this deep dive.
Yes.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Master Your Emotions. We've already uncovered so much about how our emotions work and how they can sometimes, hijack our lives, but we're not done yet. There are a few more big emotions the book tackles that I think are really important to explore. What's next on our agenda?
Well, we talked about fear a bit when we discussed procrastination, but it's such a powerful emotion that it deserves a deeper dive of its own, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. Fear is like primal, right?
Right.
It's wired into us, and it can have a huge impact on our choices, our behaviors, and ultimately the way we experience our lives. I think we all experience fear to some degree, whether it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, or even those more specific phobias like spiders or heights. So, what's the book's approach to dealing with fear? Does it suggest we try to eliminate it completely?
Actually, the book starts by acknowledging that fear is a natural human emotion, and it's not something we necessarily need to eliminate entirely.
Oh,
In fact, it can sometimes be a helpful signal that we're pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones and moving towards growth and expansion.
hmm.
Think of it as a compass, kind of pointing you towards areas where you have the potential to evolve.
So it's not about becoming fearless, but about learning to manage our fear so it doesn't paralyze us or keep us from pursuing the things that matter most to us.
Exactly. It's about developing a healthy relationship with fear, recognizing that it's part of the human experience, but not letting it dictate our choices. And the book emphasizes the importance of understanding the root causes of our fears. Like, what are those specific beliefs or experiences that are fueling those feelings? Once we've identified those triggers, we can start to challenge them and develop more empowering beliefs that support our growth.
So if I'm terrified of public speaking, for example, it might stem from a deep-seated belief that I'm not good enough or that I'll be judged harshly by the audience. By challenging those beliefs and focusing on my strengths and the value I have to offer, I can start to overcome that fear and step onto that stage with more confidence.
That's a perfect example. It's about shifting your focus from those negative, limiting beliefs to more empowering, supportive beliefs. And the book also encourages us to take action in spite of our fears. It's about recognizing that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act even when we're afraid.
So it's like that classic saying, feel the feel and do it anyway.
Exactly. It's about not letting fear be the gatekeeper of your dreams and aspirations. The book emphasizes that the more we face our fears and take action, the more confident we'll become. Each time we step outside that comfort zone, we expand our capacity for courage and resilience. It's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
I love that. It's about recognizing that fear is often an illusion, a story we tell ourselves, and that the things we're most afraid of are rarely as bad as we imagine them to be. It's our anticipation and the stories we create in our minds that often magnify the fear.
Right. It's like the saying, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And the book also offers some practical tips for managing fear in the moment, like deep breathing techniques, visualization, and positive self-talk. These are simple but powerful tools that can help you regulate your nervous system and calm those anxious thoughts.
Those are great additions to our emotional toolbox. Okay, so we've talked about fear. Are there any other emotions you think we should cover before we wrap up our deep dive?
Hmm. I think it's important to touch on depression as it's a serious issue that affects so many people. And the book provides a really interesting perspective on depression, describing it as a sign that we become disconnected from reality.
Disconnected from reality. That sounds a bit intense. What exactly does that mean?
Well, the book argues that depression often stems from getting lost in our thoughts and beliefs, particularly those that are negative or self-defeating. We might be ruminating on the past, worrying about the future, or creating stories in our minds that just fuel our unhappiness. We become so entangled in these mental narratives that we lose touch with the present moment and with our direct experience of life.
So it's like we've built this mental prison for ourselves based on our own thoughts and perceptions, and we're trapped inside our own minds.
That's a powerful way to put it. And the book emphasizes the importance of escaping that mental prison by reconnecting with the present moment, with our bodies, and with the full spectrum of our emotions. It's about grounding ourselves in the here and now, in our direct experience, rather than getting lost in those mental loops.
So instead of getting caught up in those mental spirals of negative thoughts, we need to find ways to ground ourselves in the physical world and in our senses.
Exactly. Practices like exercise, meditation, spending time in nature, and even simple things like focusing on your breath can help shift your attention away from those thought patterns and back to your immediate experience.
Those are all great ways to cultivate presence and reduce stress. But does the book offer any other insights on how to deal with depression?
It does. It highlights the importance of challenging those negative thoughts and beliefs that are keeping you stuck. It encourages you to ask yourself whether those thoughts are actually true or whether they're just stories you've created in your mind. What's the evidence to support those thoughts? Are there other, more empowering ways to interpret the situation?
So instead of automatically believing those negative thoughts, we can question them, challenge them, and look for evidence that contradicts those beliefs. It's about taking those thoughts to court and seeing if they hold up under scrutiny.
That's a great way to think about it. It's about becoming a more discerning observer of your own thoughts, rather than blindly accepting them as truth. And the book also emphasizes the importance of self-compassion. It reminds us that everyone goes through tough times and experiences difficult emotions. It's okay to not be okay.
That's such a crucial message. It's so easy to beat ourselves up when we're feeling down, but it's essential to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding. We wouldn't talk to a friend the way we sometimes talk to ourselves.
Absolutely. We need to be our own best friend, especially when we're struggling. And the book also encourages us to seek professional help if we're struggling to cope with depression on our own. It's important to remember that there's no shame in reaching out for support. There are therapists, counselors, support groups, and so many resources available to help us navigate these challenging times.
That's so important. There's no need to suffer in silence. Reaching out for support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Absolutely. And the book reminds us that recovery from depression is possible. There is hope for a brighter future. It might not be easy, but it's definitely possible.
That's really encouraging to hear. This has been such a powerful and insightful journey through the landscape of emotions. We've covered so much ground and gained so many valuable insights from Master Your Emotions. What are some of the key takeaways you think our listeners should remember as they continue their own journey of emotional mastery?
Well, one of the most empowering takeaways is that our emotions are temporary visitors,
Yeah.
not our permanent identity. They come and go like waves in the ocean. We have the power to choose how we ride those waves, how we respond to them, and how we let them shape our experience.
I love that. It's so empowering to remember that we're not at the mercy of our emotions. We have choices. We can learn to surf those waves instead of getting swept away by them.
Exactly. Yeah. And the book really emphasizes the importance of understanding how emotions form and how they can be influenced by our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. It's about becoming more conscious of our inner world, those mental and emotional patterns that shape our reality, and taking responsibility for our own emotional well-being.
So it's about becoming the master of our emotions, not the slave to them.
Yes, it's about recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond, how we interpret our experiences, and ultimately how we want to feel.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive into master your emotions has been incredible. I'm confident our listeners will benefit from these empowering perspectives and practical tools.
I agree. And for those of you listening, I leave you with this question to ponder. What's one emotion you'd like to work with, and what small step can you take today to shift your relationship with it?
That's a great challenge. Remember, even small changes can create a ripple effect and lead to big transformations over time. So keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep mastering those emotions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.